If you want to ask a question about one of the points these guys make, don't stand on ceremony, stand up, shout out, put your hands up, whatever you got to do to get my attention. That's absolutely to be encouraged. First of all, I'll just go along the line, starting with David, and if you just introduce yourselves one by one, who you are, what manufacturer you're representing, and perhaps a brief outline of your drill, please.
Yeah, so David Purdy, John Deere, and so I obviously represent the mighty John Deere 750A.
Thank you, David. Yeah, Ross Greig, so I look after Horsch, so we're here today with the Horsch Avatar direct drill.
Good afternoon, Mark Harrison from Ryetec, and we import the Mayag disc drill from Italy.
Good afternoon, Ramsey from Novag, one of the founders, and we are here to show the T-Force Plus no-till drill.
Good afternoon, Simon Weaving with the GD drill.
And I'm James Dale from Dale Drills with the Eco Drill.
Thank you, guys. Ramsey, I'll come to you first, if you grab hold of the mic. So the Novag drill has been on the market now for 4 or 5 years. I think you've sold 50 drills on the continent, but it's a new machine to the UK market. What does it offer that isn't already available? What's different about it?
Okay, so the Novag, has been on. Well, the first Novag started drilling in 8 years ago in France, but that's true. Yeah, that's the first time a Novag machine crosses the channel, so it comes to the UK. Well, I think we are here to offer a great tool for farmers looking to improve their soil biology and use the cover crops, use all the tools, the agronomical tools at their disposal. So yeah, our drills, they are. Of course, they have the main selling point of our drill is the opener, this combination between the tine and the disc. So blades, inverted T slot, and it's a tool to establish crops under thick residues, band fertilizer, and a reliable machine.
Okay, we won't skirt around the issue. I mean, the opener is very similar to another one of the drills here today, and I know there's issues going on surrounding that. Do you want to explain to us how yours is actually different from the original?
Okay, so actually we know very well the original because at the beginning of Novag we were working with the cross-lot, not to name them, cross-lot guys.
James, you represent one of the minority of Tine drill manufacturers on show here. Why Tines for you? Without getting too much into the Tine versus disc debate, why is Tine better for you? Why did you decide to develop a Tine drill originally?
Yeah, so strictly to the benefits of a Tine. Obviously, if we were a Tine with a independent independent coulter contour following, which separates us from some of the other Tine drills here. But for me, a Tine just offers a little bit more flexibility in a wetter seed bed. It allows for a little bit of extra tilth creation. Our Tine is very narrow, so we're mimicking this sort of effect of a disc in terms of reduced disturbance. But yeah, basically able to run perhaps slightly better in a wetter seed bed, and perhaps slightly more similar to some of the more conventional drills. So possibly you could argue it's an easier step to go from a min-till situation or a strip-till situation to a Tine no-till drill. So I think they're just some of the benefits without going into the other.
Very, very diplomatic. So that's the case for the Tine. Mark, would you like to give us the case for the disc?
Less disturbance is the obvious one with the disc, and I would argue they go better in the wet than a Tine. But you do notice that most Tine drills have got a disc on them somewhere, so maybe that is an argument for the disc. It's much less wear and tear. You don't ever look at the disc drill and think we must change the discs tomorrow. It's usually an overwinter job. They'll do the rest of the season. My experience of Tines on sort of hardware in land is that yes, you do have to decide to change the points on a particular day at a particular time, because otherwise you're damaging the rest of the machine.
So I think I've often heard when talking to people about the benefits of no-till and the white, more broadly speaking, regenerative agriculture, they cite cost of the equipment as a potential barrier to entry. So, I mean, I don't know, Ross, did you want to come in on that and give your thoughts on justification?
Thanks, Ollie, for perhaps one of the most complicated questions. Without a doubt, machinery is expensive, and machinery purchases are a long-term consideration. So, I mean, most of the drills that we're selling to guys, they're looking at probably a 10-year lifespan of said piece of equipment. So, yes, although it is a lot of money, it's something which is key to the profitability of your farm. So you have to get that operation right. So if that operation isn't right, then everything else is secondary, to be fair. We're certainly not the most expensive drill on the market, although we're obviously not the cheapest either. Some of the no-till drills on the market, in the past have been very expensive, but have still sold. And I think people go down that road, as I say, for the benefits that they think ultimately it will give them.
Ramsey, where are you positioning the Novag in the market? Are you are you aiming it as a sort of premium product for the hardcore no-tiller?
Well, I think that in term of price range, the Novag is quite placed high in the market for sure. This is a tool that you should aim to use for a long time because everything is the Novag is a robust machine, so I think the Novag is aimed to every farmer who wants to use the cover crops and the residues on their field and use their benefits. So old farmers with this kind of thinking, they will encounter some difficulties in the management of the residues, and that's where the Novag really shines.
Okay, and sorry, David, do you want to come in on that?
In terms of the cost thing, I think it's really interesting because the drill is probably 10-15% of the equation, and the big part of the equation is the soil for me. And if you're on a journey to regenerate the resource base, then the drill becomes more versatile. You can use it in more applications, a wider window of opportunity to use it. And the important thing is when you buy a drill is to have a drill that will do pretty much everything, to some extent you want to. But it's not going to do that unless the soil's in the right condition. And then I think it's probably true for most of the drills here, and I'm not wearing any particular hat, but I think also generally speaking, if you get your soils into really good condition, and certainly with disc drills, actually their horsepower requirement, actually that horsepower requirement comes down with better soil conditions, and often the drill demands less horsepower anyway, so less fuel consumption. So yes, there's a cost to purchasing, but longer term, if you're looking at the whole story of regenerative agriculture, then one would like to think that actually is a reduction in tillage and other operations as well. So I would think it's a cheaper option longer term.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I personally think I'd be inclined to agree. Simon, coming to you. The GD drill launched at Groundswell a few years ago now. Recently underwent a bit of a makeover with a sort of change in frame design and so on and so forth. What was the reason for making those changes? How has it benefited the drill overall?
We had some demand for 8-metre drills. Obviously, our old caddy cart system, we couldn't do that because of the height on the road. So we sort of went down the trend of a lot of the other drills on the market and looked at how they were being made. And we came up with quite a clever idea with a 3-section fold. Obviously, we had to have the tank over the top like everyone else. But we made a bit like a digger bucket knuckle that locks the wings into position when it's in drilling, but it also locks it up when it's in transport. And then Dad and I were talking about it, and we're exporting more drills around the world. We couldn't get our existing drill into containers, was one point. And also we wanted a machine that was a bit more compact when turning on headlands, things like that. Less oil flow, and we just wanted to streamline it a lot more than we have. Like, we got our caddy pretty streamlined, but we've streamlined it again. We've created a little bit more coal to pressure, not necessarily saying that we needed it, because we could transfer the weight of our old drill onto the toolbar. But it's just really made it more compact, and also we're going to bring it down through the range now from 4 meters up to 8, and there's a new Mini 3 coming out at the end of the year.
Superb. You spoke about coulter pressures there.
Yeah.
I think all manufacturers band about, figures about coulter pressures, and it almost seems to be treated as a good thing to be able to put more pressure on. Whereas there might be a counter argument to that actually putting more pressure on is more likely to create compaction in the seeding zone. So is the right path to be taking more to create an opener design that requires less pressure to still be able to achieve that consistent depth?
Well, the actual GD system, how it works, it's a closed line circuit, so you've got a left and a right hand side. So we power the coulters down. You've got 100 mil ram straight. We leave 50 mil in, 50 mil out, so it can contour follow. But our back wheels on our new design is a little bit like our old design. We can transfer the weight fully onto the toolbar, or we can take the weight off, depending on what the customer wants to do. So if he wants to go on ploughing that's being pressed, for example, and he just wants to take a bit of weight so it's not sinking in, you can do that with the flick of a switch. And it's just very, very simple. I think that's one of the biggest benefits to my drill is, and what we've seen over the last 4 years since we launched the GD, is not necessarily all my customers want to go whole hog no-till drilling. What we've seen a lot of is customers want to go low disturbance farming, feel their way into direct drilling, see when their soils are right, and the GD lifts a flap of soil at a 25-degree angle, tucks the seed underneath. We're not getting any vertical compaction. The roots can grow vertically down, and then the seed can come up through the flap. And it's also, with our old drill, we used to have a big problem when we had a lot of chopped straw. We used to just push it down into the slot. And I'm not going to stand here and say that we don't do that now, but what we have found is the cutting disc might push a little bit of straw down, but because it's tucking it under that flap at an angle, 9 times out of 10 the seed is away from the straw, and it's not something that affects us anymore. But I think as we go on, more and more people will go towards no-till, but I think people are very wary of just going, right, we want to just go drilling. And now there is all these drills here will go on a cultivated seabed. It's just how you do it, and it's customer preference at the end of the day to which brand you want to buy. That's how I see it.
Ramsey, do you want to follow on from that? Just as an engineer, your take on the coulter pressure or not sort of debate,
Well, for example, in the case of the Novag, the Novag can apply a lot of coulter pressure, like 500 kilos to the maximum. And in our case, this pressure, it's required mostly not to create the slot, because it's actually the tine in the blades in our drill creates the slot. It's mostly to cut through the residues, so very thick layer of residues, or to cut a very thin slot a bit deeper than the blades, so to create some room for evacuating the water, for example, or for pushing the straw for the hairpinning, because of course with the Novag the straw also enters the slot, so pushing the straw deeper so it doesn't affect the seed at all. So the weight is needed to cut on the Novag, not to create the slot. So there is the compaction problem. It's really completely different equation. When we have thick residues, when we want to get the seed depth, often with this, when we want to cut them, we need a lot of downforce. That's why we offer it.
And James, from the tine perspective, does a tine require more or less downforce to achieve the same sort of even seeding depth?
Well, a lot less. A tine drill can be a lot lighter. A disc is rather like a backward-facing tine. If you pull a backward-facing tine through the ground, it's lifting up all the time. A disc is always trying to climb out of the soil. The bigger the diameter of the disc, the more weight you need, and that's why you'll see a variation between my friend's drills here in terms of weight and disc diameter. But a tine, and a forward-facing tine like mine, doesn't need the weight, and that's a big benefit when we're trying to avoid compaction of the soil when we're direct drilling. So yeah, generally speaking, tine drills will be lighter, and the idea of coulter pressure is not a consideration really with the tine drill. Simply drawing it through the ground will pull that tine in. So it's not really the same effect and the same theory with the tine against the disc.
Yeah, fair comment. You build drills right the way up to quite a Goliath, 13.5 metres in width. Are you seeing any sort of trend towards wider working widths? People trying to cover bigger areas, or not so much?
Definitely, the fact that the drills are easier to pull, the fact that we don't need a lot of coulter pressure, we can build a much wider drill. If we were relying on the hopper, the central hopper, to provide the coulter pressure, we couldn't build such wide machines. So that a tine is much easier to build a wider machine, and because my machines are easier to pull, we can produce machines all the way up to 13.5 metres. And of course that brings in the benefits of controlled traffic, or even just reduced traffic, because you've got a much wider drill behind a relatively modest tractor. Your tracks are going to be wider apart. You're in effect running on a greatly reduced area of soil. On my own farm, I use a 9-metre CTF system. I'm only running on 22% of the middle of the field. The other 78% is untouched. It's beautifully tilthy, lovely, loose soil, just like a pasture would be. And that's a huge benefit. I know also exactly where my compaction is with my controlled traffic, and I can deal with that, just in that 22%. So it offers significant efficiencies.
It's interesting, you brought up controlled traffic farming there. Some people I know who are sort of long-term no-tillers seem to think controlling or controlled traffic is less of an issue on long-term no-tilled ground because it has that much more trafficability because you're not destroying the structure on a regular basis. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's probably true. The resilience of the soil builds up. We've got more organic material in the soil, and I'm sure all these guys would attest to the fact that the longer you do no-till, the better your soils become. So I would agree with that. I think that when you listen to the likes of Tim Shaman at CTF Europe, the first pass does always seem to create the most compaction. Passes thereafter are a lower percentage. So if you can share the same wheel weight, it's certainly always a benefit, no matter how healthy your soils are. But I do agree with that statement that over time your soils become more resilient, they can take weight, they can take traffic better. David,
did you want to come in on that based on your quite extensive research into soil structure and trafficability? Do you think CTF is more or less relevant in a no-till situation?
I think you have to define what you mean by controlling traffic, but I think clear, if you look at some of the research, then the absolute number one thing you need to do is build the carbon within the soil, because that makes soil essentially more resilient to compaction, but also it gives you more opportunity for minimum disturbance, if that's what we want to call it, or no-till operation. So that's the fundamental building block. If you don't do that, then I think you're going to be always challenged, really, because no-till in itself actually could reduce your soil structure. It could actually, on very heavy soil types, actually increase your bulk densities. So you've got to have other biological interventions, and we know what all they are now, but in order to make no-trilling really work hard. And I think that's where it falls over. If someone just buys a drill and thinks it's going to be the antidote for everything, doesn't matter what colour it is, we've got to do the whole sort of regenerative approach, and then we've got real opportunities, I think.
Yeah, so really the point you're making, and personally I would agree with it wholeheartedly, is that no-tilling, the drill itself, and the practice itself is really just one tool in the regenerative agriculture toolbox.
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of know from my own experience and research that, when you start to really biologically change your soils, then, to be honest with you, the debate almost disappears, because you've got your soils in such a lovely condition and you're on that journey. I'm not saying it's like that every year, and climate is a big challenge. Winter cropping and climate are big challenges, and heavier soil types in the spring are also big challenges. But I think we're pretty clear now that the drill itself is not going to be the antidote to everything.
Ross, Horsch obviously make a wide range of cultivation kit as well as the no-till drills that you offer. Are you seeing a swing towards sort of more no-till practices or less disturbance? Is Horsch as a company focusing more on that avenue of things, or is it still very much a cultivation-based business?
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. I mean, I've been selling or involved in the Horsch drill since 2007, and initially, when I first started getting involved, and the Tine seeders were prominent. Then the disc drills became more popular, and now we're seeing more of a move towards a combination of Tine seeders and our low disturbance disc drills. And in essence, I think really there's two reasons for that. There's two reasons why people are looking at low disturbance drilling. Essentially, first of all, you've got people who are looking to obviously improve their soil health and lower their cost of establishment. They're looking at improving the bottom line. So the theory they're looking towards is the less passes they have to do to establish the crop, I should say. Sorry. Obviously, the lower cost and hopefully the better the bottom line. So that's the one side of the argument. And then the other side, which we're seeing more frequently, particularly in the heavy land areas, is blackgrass implications. Blackgrass is probably the biggest issue we currently face at the moment, certainly in my opinion anyway. So we're finding that people are looking primarily to cultivate shallow depth, so they're keeping their weed seed horizons to as shallow a depth as possible. Looking to incorporate straw, again, to improve the organic matter of the soil and the carbon content, but also to cultivate as shallow a depth as possible to control the weed seeds in as shallow a depth as possible. So looking to get a good chit. So this is obviously where the cultivation side of it does run in parallel to our drills. So we're selling more of lighter tine cultivators, which are more controllable, I'd have to say, for depth and disc machines. So very shallow pass immediately after the combine. Consolidation is very important as well, for not only for moisture retention, but also to get seeds to germinate. Weed seeds are no different to any other small seeds. They germinate through seed-soil contact. So if you keep the moisture in there, consolidate it nicely, hopefully get a good flush of weeds, whatever they happen to be, control them for as long as we've got the use of glyphosate, and then crucially, this is where the low disturbance drills come in. People are looking to establish the crop scent with as little disturbance as possible. So the trend is probably changing, to answer your original question, Ollie, in the type of cultivation equipment we're selling. The sledgehammer to crack a nut really machines are dying out, and the lighter, more precise machines are working in conjunction with our drills.
Superb, thanks very much. There's a lot of people who are running sort of older or existing Horsch tine drills, such as sprinters or COs, who are retrofitting lower disturbance points, and there's at least one exhibitor here today showing such points. Do Horsch have any plans themselves to develop a lower disturbance point for the sprinter, for example, to sort of make it more of a no-till design drill? Sorry, make it better suited to no-till? Yeah,
the short answer is no. We worked with probably one of the better known manufacturers, it would probably be 4 years ago now, to establish which type of their opener suited our sprinter drill the best, which we did. And without naming names, we wanted to have exclusivity for that product in the UK. And I think quite understandably they didn't want to go down that road. But we are quite happy to supply our drills less coulters and fit that type of coulter to our drills. The benefits that it gives, I mean, if we just step back a little bit, the Horsch Sprinter, the Duet coulter is a development of an Anderson coulter, which is a North American direct drilling coulter. It uses either between a 3.5 and a 4-inch lead on the point below the base plate, and the idea with that was it's designed to work in a dry climate. It's designed to harvest a little bit of moisture, create a cultivating action. The seed is then placed and then it grows. it's we're seeing one of the things which is crucial to blackgrass control, and I'm sure we've all been to lots of blackgrass meetings and everybody has taken things away from them. But if there's one thing which is probably a common factor that we can all use, is delayed drilling certainly helps. So with delayed drilling, unfortunately, January becomes wetter seabeds. So with the Duet coulter, it became less suitable for drilling later. It tended to pull up perhaps a little bit too much moisture. So the lower disturbance, new generation of coulters which are out there, as I say, disturb less soil, have less moisture, bring less moisture to the surface, and probably improve the seed placement too.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the floor at all, please? Yes, sir.
Yeah, just come back on the blackgrass situation. So far I know it's quite a hard herb to control, and maybe it counts to the pioneer weeds, which is always in soil with a lot of bacteria because there's a lot of tillage and movement. So I guess so we have drills which have less disturbance. We should improve our soil microbiology to get more to a bacterial fungi 1-to-1 ratio, and then we might make it unsuitable for those weeds to grow in our soil. That we got healthy weeds. So I guess everything which is still moving the soil. So it's.
Yeah, I think you're right. There is perhaps a counter argument and some science that does show that perhaps rather than creating a cultivation chit to then be sprayed off, or using cultivation to create a chit to then spray off, you're perhaps better off doing nothing, leaving on the surface, leaving it to be predated, and then no-till sowing with absolutely zero disturbance. There's kind of two schools of thought there. I think you're right. James, I mean, you're from farming, so you're directly involved with farming as well. What are your thoughts on that?
I think obviously my Tine drill does disturb a bit more soil than a disc, but for me, beating blackgrass, and I think probably the questioner was kind of on this point, it's more than just one thing. You'll not destroy blackgrass just by not disturbing the soil. There's plenty of fallow fields that have been left fallow that are growing a lovely crop of blackgrass with no disturbance at all. Not all of it will be predated. If it's in the top couple of inches of soil, a bit of weathering, it'll start to grow. Building the health of the soil, absolutely, I think will help reduce the blackgrass pressure. I think blackgrass tends to grow in wetter soils, so as the soil structure improves, that should help beat it blackgrass. But I think we need to delay drilling, definitely. Delayed drilling means normally working in a wetter seed bed. Wetter seed bed, a Tine, I think, is a slightly better fit. You also want to ensure that you're going to cover the seed well, so actually generating a little bit of tilth in the top to cover the seed over, so that when you apply a big herbicide stack, if you've got bad blackgrass, you're not going to get seed scorch and lose vigour from your main crop. Also, wetter seed beds, lighter drills, gonna not compact the ground quite so much. So there are a number of other issues that, it's if you go down the line of don't disturb the soil, I don't think that's enough to beat blackgrass. It's a worthy foe, and we need everything else, and that's that's my take on it, I suppose.
Dick, I'm afraid I've just noticed you're sat in front of me, and he rolled his eyes. For those that don't know, Dick's a bit of an authority on blackgrass. Do you have any thoughts, if I could ask you, on no-till's relationship with blackgrass and vice versa?
I think it would be dangerous, as James has probably just alluded to. It'd be dangerous to think that we can control blackgrass without any intervention management other than wait until we go in with the drill. You're just leaving yourself a bit in no man's land. It's great if nature works all the way along the line with you, but if she's not playing ball, sometimes you have to take the weed by the scruff of the neck and make it do what you want it to do, rather than hope you end up in the right place. I think listening to soil biological arguments, yeah, absolutely, that's fine, but I think that's something we need to take or keep in context of the long term. If you've got black grass in the short term that you need to really get control of, then relying on trying to change your soil biology or the ratio of fungi versus bacteria would not be the way to be successful. And I think, you know, we talk about blackgrass all the time, Ross mentioned shallow tillage straight behind the combine. There are other weeds like bromes, like ryegrass, which are creeping in more and more now as well. It's not just about blackgrass. You need to stand back and identify what you've got. What issues do I need to deal with? Because if you're identifying brome as brome rather than it's sterile brome or it's meadow brome, if you've got meadow brome and you go in with a cultivator straight behind the combine, you're just going to set dormancy and it's going to come back up and bite you 3, 4, 5 months later, probably after your residual herbicides have had their peak of activity. That needs to ripen out the back of the combine, and it needs to sit on the ground for a month and do nothing before you start cultivating it. So understand the weed that you've got rather than just say weeds all react in the same way, because they don't. Superb.
Thanks, Dick, and sorry to do that to you. Are there any more questions or any more points that you'd like to make as an audience? If not, unless you guys have got anything you'd like to add, I think we'll wrap it up there. So if you wouldn't mind, just show your appreciation for these guys here and also for Dick for jumping in. And thanks very much indeed, and hopefully we'll see you all next year.